Well, hello again, my friends, and welcome once more to the Invisible College. As I'm sure you know by now, my name is Adrian Gilbert, and we're in the process. We're doing a little series of lectures based on a book, loosely based, I should say, on a book by J.G. Bennett called Transformation. And this is going to be the second of these lectures, and it concerns the subject of struggle. He listed that as one of the roots of what we need to do if we want to transform ourselves. So without more ado, I'm going to press on with this lecture, and we'll see where it takes us. Now then, in the previous lecture, which was learning, we focused on the works of one of Gurdjieff's students, J.G. Bennett. If you don't know who Gurdjieff is, or was, watch some of my earlier lectures, particularly the one just before this. But he was a mystic teacher from the east, eastern Turkey, Russia border area. But enough on that. Bennett, anyway, I had the good fortune to meet Mr. Bennett on several occasions. He's undoubtedly a polymath and one of the most intelligent people of his generation. He was unusual as an esotericist in that he thought for himself. Now that needs a little bit of explanation. A lot of people say, yes, I'm an esotericist. Or they might say, yeah, I'm a devotee of Krishnamurti. Or if they're on the dark side, they might say, well, I follow Aleister Crowley or something like this. Well, that's not a genuine initiate of the way. Someone who's to teach, to be an initiate, really, you've got to do it on your own terms, your own name, under your own banner. That's how I judge things anyway. If someone says, well, I'm a devotee of Krishnamurti and I'm continuing his work, I might say, well, good, yeah, excellent. But I wouldn't see that as meaning that he's now transformed, because he's still trading on someone else's name. And it wasn't really towards the end of Bennett's life that he felt confident enough to trade on his own name. Before that, he was trading under other names. Gurdjieff, Uspensky, Subud for a while. But eventually, towards the end of his life, he realized he'd gathered enough of his own wisdom to want to express that, and he taught under his own name. And that's when I met him, and he was an impressive man. He's a mathematician, former soldier, diplomat, and spy master. He was spy master in Istanbul just after the First World War. He was running what you might call the whole British spy operation in the Far East, or the Middle East, I should say. He headed the British Coal Utilisation Council during World War II. And you have to remember that during the Second World War, Britain was, it was difficult to import things. There were submarines around the coast, and in the Atlantic. And a lot of merchant ships got sunk. A lot of merchantmen, brave sailors sailing these ships, unarmed ships, which were being attacked by German submarines as part of the blockade that they were exercising on Britain. So it was necessary to find ways of using coal in a better fashion than we had been. Coal is you can burn it, yes, of course you can. And when I was a kid, everyone had coal fires, but you could also heat it up and it would give off gases. You make coal gas that way, but also fractionate other things like ammonia and tar oils. All sorts of things would come off coal if it was heated up without air. So he was chairman of the Coal Utilisation Council, where they were using coal to manufacture all sorts of things that were needed to make up the difference, because we couldn't import so much oil as we needed. And of course, coal was used in steam engines, which were perpetuated long past their sell-by date. Right, so he was also a remarkable linguist who spoke fluent Turkish, Greek, Indonesian, and could even read Tibetan. This was in addition to various European languages, including French and German. So this man was a remarkable character in his own right. And then he studied with these teachers, and eventually, as I say, towards the end of his life, he was putting his own ideas together and teaching those. When I first met him in 1973, he was running an experimental esoteric school at Sherborne House near Cheltenham in Gloucester. So this was kind of his major work at the time. It might even be in 1972. I'm not absolutely certain. It was spring, I know that. It might have been 72 rather than 73, but that doesn't really matter, does it? Anyway, Bennett wrote many books, but the one we are focusing on with this series is a short work entitled Transformation. In it, he details certain teachings he encountered on his own path and also gives warnings about the dangers facing anyone entering the way of transformation without the protection and guidance of a credible teacher. Unfortunately, the world is now moving so fast that we don't have time to spend half our lives searching for a suitable guru living in a cave in Hindu Kush. Most of us have little choice but to take our chances with what comes our way. And this is where his book comes into its own, at least I think so. For it provides guidance for what we should expect and what we should avoid. Yeah, so it's a good guidebook, this one, and it really has helped me a lot, and I think it could help you too. This is why I feel entitled to draw upon Bennett's wisdom. In this lightning world that we live in, there are very few people we can trust to be our teachers. There are cults aplenty, but these, generally speaking, mislead as they take our money and time. Yeah, no, I've met a few cults. I met Hare Krishna people, living in absolute poverty and squats, and going up and down Oxford Street singing Hare Krishna all the time. Met some of those people, nice people, but not getting them anywhere. Not in my opinion, anyway. I know lots of other cults. You think of Scientology. I would classify that as a cult. Take your money and leave you in the lurch. Very nice maybe for the cult leaders, but I think it damages them too. I know lots of other cults. You don't need me to go into that, but anyway, so we don't want to get caught up in cults. This is not a cult. This is just me talking to a camera, and if you want to listen to what I have to say, great. If you don't, that's your choice, And if you want to donate through Patreon, I'm, absolutely delighted. We certainly need it, but it's your choice, and you're not being forced to do anything that you don't want to do. So it's not a cult. And even established churches, which ought to be repositories of eternal wisdom, turn out to be nothing of the sort. Many teach false doctrines at odds with the Bible and are themselves tainted by paedophile scandals among the priesthood. And of course I'm thinking here particularly of the Catholic Church, and I was brought up as a Catholic, and I'm horrified, by these terrible scandals that have come out of Ireland and Britain and America, and I think now in Italy. Well, what do they expect, to be honest, when you have you insist that the priesthood must be celibate? They're not allowed to marry, not allowed to have sex. Probably do on the side occasionally, but then that's a sin, in the way they're doing it. And you're going to attract people that are, let's just say, a bit wobbly, who don't want a normal life with a normal family. I'm not going to say any more on that, but it's not so surprising that it attracts a lot of paedophiles. And that is a horror to me, and it should be to you as well. And even more, it should be to the Pope and those who run the Catholic Church. They should be disgusted and shocked with themselves. And there's going to be heavy judgment on that on the last day, I'm sure of it. Anyway, let us therefore give thanks to John Bennett for giving us a rough guide as to what we should expect as we attempt to transform ourselves into something better than intelligent apes. Yeah, I certainly give thanks to him, and certainly his work has helped me a lot, particularly his books, and I've read most of them, if not all. So, in his book, that's his Transformation, Bennett recognised that there are 4 factors that need to be present if we are to have any chance of success. And I'm recapping here. The first of these is learning. The second he calls struggle. The third he calls help. And the fourth he calls sacrifice. And I've found in my own life that this is a truthful representation, that we do actually need these 4 ingredients. It's like if you're baking a cake, you know, you've got to have flour, definitely got to have flour. You need to have salt. You're going to need eggs if you want your cake to bind together. You're going to need oil of some sort. It might be butter, might be oil. You're going to need some kind of fatty thing. And then you may need to put in raisins, depending on the type of cake you're making. Caraway seeds, maybe. I hate caraway seed cake. But they used to make it a lot when I was a boy. I didn't like it. But you know how it is. When you're going to bake a cake, you need various ingredients. And you leave out any ingredient, and it's not going to be right. It's not going to work properly, is it? So it's the same with transformation, that we need all of these ingredients, and we need to pay attention to them if we want to be successful in baking ourselves. We are the cake that's going to be made. We're trying to transform ourselves and form higher bodies in ourselves. And if you leave out the ingredients, then it's not going to happen for you. Anyway, so in the last lecture, we discussed the need for learning. That's right. And in this one, we're going to focus on struggle. Right. So this is number 2 in the series, and we're focusing now on struggle and what that's going to mean. As I said before, if you'd like to know what J.G. Bennett himself has to say on the subject, then I recommend you read his book. I'm not going to repeat his words here, as his learning is not my learning. Remember what I was saying earlier, that, you need to teach under your own name, and I'm teaching this under my own name. I have the confidence that I am in a position that I can do this, and I've had the experience and the knowledge to be able to do this. So I have great respect for him, and I would recommend that you do read that book. But I'm not going to try to interpret it for you, because it's not my book, it's his book, and I've got my own view on this subject. So that's what we're going to go with here. So why do we have to struggle? Does this imply some sort of survival of the fittest doctrine? In other words, are we struggling to get to the top of the ladder? We want to beat everyone else to get there first. Is that what it's all about? Is that what struggling is? Well, no. The struggle we have is principally with our own bad habits. Yes. Yeah, you've got them, haven't you? You've got bad habits. I have. I know. We all have. And you have to struggle with them. This is one of the principal reasons that the human race is in trouble on this planet. Gurdjieff talks a lot about this, actually, in his book Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. How for certain accidental reasons on this planet, our development as a species was interrupted and things happened. We have this in the Bible with the fall of Adam and Eve, that they ate the apple, and because of that there's an original sin, they call it, original sin that's passed down. Well, this is basically talking about the bad habits that have come into the human race and how we have to deal with those. We've got inherited habits that have come down to us from our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, going way back. And these are part of the burden that we carry. So we have to struggle with those habits and try to understand and see them for what they are and perfect ourselves. This is what we're trying to do here, to get to a higher level, try to get back. And it's not as simple as I don't believe anyway, that as a priest just pouring water over the baby's head, making a sign of the cross, saying, "Right, cast the devil out, you're forgiven," all that original sin stuff in the bin. No, it doesn't work like that, does it? We have to develop, and it takes a lifetime. Yeah, and we have to struggle to do that. So this is the way I'm understanding it, and the way we're taking it forwards here. We are all of us creatures of habit. Either deliberately or more likely accidentally, we form certain habits which for us become like a comfortable pair of shoes. They may be no good for us and perhaps even harmful, but we do them anyway. It's a bad habit. I'm going to give you an example here. Let's take, for example, going to the bookmakers. I'm sorry, Ladbrokes, I'm not trying to point a finger at you personally. There's loads of other bookmakers too. Just happened that I found that picture. So let's take the example of going to the bookmakers to place a bet on the horses. Right? That's something that a lot of people do in this country and perhaps in other countries. Go to the bookies, place a bet on the GGs. Now, I don't have this habit, thank God, but for some people it is an absolute compulsion. The attractions are many. First of all, there's the whole business of picking winners from the newspapers. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever known anyone that's into racing. They have racing times, and most of the other papers, or quite a few of them, have pages where they have the races that are going on today and the different horses and so on, and you can get sort of guidebooks that talk about all the horses and what their bloodlines are, and people pore over this and they study it closely. Oh yeah, this unknown horse, his blood is from the father's that and the mother's that, and yeah, this could be it's on 100 to 1, but I know that it's got good stock there and it could really win for me. It becomes an obsession and a passion, and they go to the racing meetings and they place bets and hope to win, of course. And this is an intriguing combination of science and art. In other words, the gambler tries to narrow the odds by learning as much as possible about the horse's running. He's pitching himself against the bookie, and so there is a sense of one-upmanship. In other words, the bookie, the person who's setting the odds on that horse, he's looking back at if that horse has run in other races, what his handicap is, what its bloodline is. He's got all that data as well. So the gambler, the serious gambler, is trying to get one over on the bookie that he knows better, and he's going to upset the odds, and he's going to find that the right horse at good odds that he's going to make money. So that's a challenge, and it's fun for some people. Then there's the thrill of placing the bet. Yeah, the whole business of going into the shop and handing the money across and getting the little ticket. There's a TV playing in there and you can watch it with all the other guys. And this is followed by the adrenaline rush of the race itself. Suddenly the horses are all off. Yeah, blum, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Yeah, and he's watching his horse, and his horse is he's leading the pack, and yeah. And then suddenly another horse is overtaking him and he's cheering his horse on. Yeah, so there's a whole adrenaline rush thing going there. Right? However, behind all of this is the possibility that against all odds he might win. This chance to get something for nothing is the hook, right? So that's the hook. Yeah, I'm gonna win. I'm a potential winner. I'm gonna make money out of this. It is, of course, an illusion. Although the gambler may win sometimes, mostly he loses. If this were not the case, there would be no gambling shops and the whole industry would disappear. This is also true of other types of gambling, everything from scratch cards to the most glitzy Vegas casinos, as we see here. The urge to splurge can be irresistible for those so tempted, and you can see, I've not been to Vegas, but I've seen lots of movies with it in. And I have been to, where was it? I can't remember the name of the place, just over the border from California, where they had big casinos there. some friends of mine wanted to go there, and I was absolutely horrified. You had great banks of these slot machines. You know, you can put your quarter in at times, as back in the 70s. I guess it's always dollars now, or tokens of some sort. Pull the one-armed bandit and things roll round and, oh, lost again. Put another dollar in. And I remember standing there and I was watching this woman, and she had a whole bank, about 5 or 6 machines that she was working at once. Oh, you know, and she got very shirty when I was going to put a dollar in one of them. I didn't, you know, I don't like gambling, but I was there, so I thought, well, I'll just do it once. Oh, get off my machine! This is my machine. Well, I watched her lose a whole load of money. It is incredible. But people will remember the times they won. They forget all the times they lost, and they could be losing all their pay. They can't keep up with the mortgage payments. The children are not getting enough food to eat. They're not getting clothes. It brings about divorce. They end up out in the street. You know, it's terrible what gambling can do to people. So, gambling is not the only addiction, of course. There are chemical addictions, everything from alcohol and tobacco to pills and custard pies. Yeah, you can be addicted to custard pies. Piling on those pounds, piling on that weight, because you're addicted, eating too much. And we all have bad habits that can get in the way of self-development. This can be anything from poor personal hygiene to laziness to gossiping, habitual lying, bad language, angry outbursts, bullying, sexual cheating, pornography, stealing, and even serial murder. Think about that. There are people who actually are addicted to going out and murdering people. They did it once and twice, and then they can get a kick out of that. I mean, it's extraordinary that the human race is a very addictive species. And once a pattern of behaviour is set in, it's very hard to break it. You try, getting people to give up being thieves and send them to prison. Yeah, well, it doesn't do very much for them. They come straight out, they go straight back into it, and then they're picked up again and back in prison. And you can live your whole life that way. Shocking, but true. We are a very addictive species, and this makes life very difficult for us. And it's one of the things we have to struggle with. Almost everything we do can become either addictive behaviour or its cousin, bad habits. We all have different patterns of behaviour, and we are not tempted by the same things. The person addicted to gambling may not be self-indulgent with ice cream. He may not be a thief or a workplace bully. This guy in the picture here is a workplace bully. Not everyone's going to be a workplace bully, but they might have a different addiction. But we all have these things, and we know what we're like. We should do. By the time you get to any kind of age, you should know what your bad habits are. Now, in traditional Christianity, it's long been recognized that our habits come under the headings of just 7 deadly sins. These were characterized in Marlowe's play, The Damnation of Faust. Now, I'm going to read this out to you. I took this little extract from Marlowe's Faust. If you don't know what Marlowe's Faust is, Christopher Marlowe was a rival of Shakespeare, lived around the same time. Actually had a very unfortunate life. He's said to have been a spy for the Elizabethan court. He's also a bit of a boozer, I think, because he got into a knife fight in a pub in a place called Deptford, which was a sort of small port in the Thames estuary, just outside London. Anyway, so that's how he died, poor guy. And he was an absolute genius. He should have been, he is one of our greatest playwrights, what he had written, but he died a very young man, and we could have expected so much more. And it's a great tragedy that we didn't get it. But he wrote a play called The Damnation of Faust. And in case you don't know the story of Faust, Faust is a German academic who's exhausted all he can learn from sciences and books, and he wants to know even more. And he's approached by Mephistopheles, who's a kind of manifestation of the devil, who persuades him to make a pact with the devil, and he'll give him whatever he wants in exchange for his soul. So that's the basis of Marlowe's Dr. Faust. And I've done another program on this, I think, somewhere. No sympathy. I think it's in the No Sympathy for the Devil program. Anyway, I got this little extract from The Damnation of Faust, because it's quite amusing, and I think it makes this point very well. Now then, let's get to the first page. On the page here. Yes. So it says, enter the 7 deadly sins, right? So the 7 people personifying the 7 deadly sins. Now Faustus examines them of their several names and dispositions. So Faustus, what art thou, the first? The first one's called pride. Pride. I am pride. I disdain to have any parents. I am like to Ovid's flea. I can creep into every corner of a wench. Sometimes, like a periwig, I sit upon her brow, or like a fan of feathers I kiss her lips. Indeed I do. What do I not? But fie, what a scent is here! I'll not speak another word except the ground were perfumed and covered with cloth of arras. Faustus, what art thou, the second? Covetousness. I am covetousness, begotten of an old churl in an old leathern bag. And might I have my wish, I would desire that this house and all the people in it were turned to gold, that I might lock you up in my good chest. Oh, my sweet gold. And Faustus goes on. What art thou, the third? I am wrath. I had neither father nor mother. I leapt out of a lion's mouth when I was scarce half an hour old. And ever since I have run up and down the world with this case of rapiers, wounding myself when I had nobody to fight withal. I was born in hell, and look to it, for some of you shall be my father. Faustus, what art thou, the fourth? I am envy, begotten of a chimney sweep and an oyster wife. I cannot read, and therefore wish all books were burnt. I am lean with seeing others eat. Oh, that there would come a famine through all the world, that I might die, and I'd live alone, that all might die, and I'd live alone. Then thou shouldst see how fat I would be. But must thou sit and I stand? Come down with a vengeance. Away, envious rascal. What art thou, the fifth? Who am I, sir? Why, I, sir, I am gluttony. My parents are all dead, and devil a penny they've left me but a bare pension, and that is 30 meals a day and 10 bevies, a small trifle to suffice in nature. Oh, I come of royal parentage. My grandfather was a gammon of bacon, my grandmother a hogshead of claret wine. My godfathers were these, Peter Pickleherring and Martin Martlemas beef. Oh, but my godmother, she was a jolly gentlewoman, and well beloved in every good town and city. Her name was Mistress Marjorie Marchbeer. Now, Faustus, thou hast heard all my progeny. Wilt thou bid me to supper? Faustus. No, I'll see thee hanged. Thou wilt eat up all my victuals. Gluttony. Then the devil choke thee. Choke thyself, gluttony. What art thou, the sixth? I am sloth. I was begotten on a sunny bank, where I have lain ever since. And you've done me great injury to bring me from thence. Let me be carried thither again by gluttony and lechery. I'll not speak another word for a king's ransom. What are you, Mistress Minx, the seventh and last? Lechery. Who, I, sir? I am one of the loves. Who, I, sir? I am one that loves an inch of mutton. Better than an ell of fried stockfish. And the first letter of my name begins with L. Away to hell! Away to hell! So that is kind of Marlowe's skit on the the seven deadly sins, which we see here. They're not all quite the same names, but most of them are the same. We got pride and greed and wrath and envy and gluttony and sloth and lust. L1, lust. And in traditional Christianity, it's been recognized that these are habits that fall into these seven categories. Everyone, to some extent or another, is tempted within one of those categories. It might not be exactly like that, and there might be more than one, actually. Very likely is, But there are greedy people, there are lustful people, there are slothful people, and we have to struggle with these things if we want to progress and we want to develop ourselves. If we don't want to develop, well, you're probably going to go to hell, certainly within the Christian terms. I'm not joking here. This is reality, and we need to get a grip on it and see it for what it is. Now then, in traditional Christianity, it's long been recognized that our habits come under the headings of just seven deadly sins. These were characterized in Marlowe's play Damnation of Faust. Well, you've just heard that. Astrologers link these to the influences of the seven planets of the ancients. Another way of seeing these is through Jungian archetypes. So pride, for instance, would be the sun, wrath would be Mars, lust would be Venus. Sloth, I think, is probably the moon. Envy, I should think, is Mercury. And then we've got greed and gluttony. One of those must be Jupiter and the other Saturn. But I think probably greed is Saturn and gluttony is Jupiter. So they saw that in terms of astrology, the seven deadly sins, linking to the seven planets. Regardless of astrology, we all have to struggle with at least one of these throughout life. Call it a weakness in DNA, ancestral inheritance, original sin, a personal demon, or whatever. It is always there and has to be struggled with if we are to achieve the transformation we aspire to. This is made all the harder as the media, advertisers, many businesses and pressure groups prey on these weaknesses for our loss and their gain. Yeah, this is something that happens, that all that advertising you see on television, they're always looking for the chink in our armour. They're looking for the thing that will hook us. And it might be our greed. They want to hook into our greed. Or else they know that we're tempted sexually. So they put on lots of pictures of sexual imagery because that will hold our attention. And then they can sell us while we're in that state. And so it goes on, it's always the same. And they're preying on our weaknesses to gain money from us. So struggling with inner demons is only part of the story, though. In order to make progress, we must develop at least a modicum of self-discipline. We need to become stronger individuals if we want to crystallize our higher bodies. So that's what this boot camp's all about, initially, because the recruits haven't got any discipline or very little, they're put under discipline. They have a staff sergeant sort of shouting at them, pushing them to do more and more press-ups or whatever. But the intention is that eventually they'll get the discipline in themselves, and they will not need to have somebody else pushing them. They will have that discipline, and that's when they are fit and able to become true soldiers. That's the theory anyway. But this is harder if we're on our own and not at a boot camp with someone else pushing us beyond our limits. However, every little effort counts. Nobody becomes perfect overnight. We're never going to attain the perfection of Jesus Christ. I know I'm not. Maybe you will, I don't know. But then we don't need to. I mean, we need to be as good as we can be. And by pushing yourself and trying to gain control over your habits, you are causing friction. And from that friction, you cause a heat. And the heat is what will crystallize your higher bodies. This is what it's all about with transformation. And the more we struggle and try to do better, whether it is physical training, mental training, emotional training, or spiritual training, the more higher energies are drawn to us and crystallize. We can grow in being and not just in knowledge or possibility. But more about that in later lectures. And Gurdjieff knew all about this and taught it too. And he would identify what he called the principal feature of each of his pupils. He would then, without fear or favour, hit this very hard. He called this identifying where their corns were and then stepping on them. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about with corns in English, sort of painful growths on your toes and your feet from calloused skin, that if it's pressed on it hurts. You have various corn removing creams, and you know what I'm talking about. I don't know what it is in other languages, but that's what we're talking about. So he would step on their corns metaphorically to make them draw attention to what they needed to work on. And Bennett gives one hilarious example of this, him doing this. Not in this book, he put it in another of his books. At the end of G's life, he would invite gatherings of his pupils to supper in his flat. He lived in a little flat in Paris at the time. And he knew which were the drinkers of alcohol and which weren't. And the former, that's the alcoholics, would be given no alcohol, though they were craving it. I mean, you can see other people drinking and they're not given any. That was one way of waking them up. But on the other side, there were those who didn't want to drink, and he would make them drink until they were quite drunk. So he recognized that they also, perhaps they were being very superior about how they were. Oh, I don't drink, oh, look at him, he's this old drunkard, he can't hold it, can't stop himself. I'm so much better. Make them drink. So to recognize something else in themselves. It's not a technique I would apply, but this is something that he did, apparently. And this reversal of nature was G's way of drawing his students' attention to their faults by bringing friction and hence struggle into the proceedings. So he's waking them up, by shaking them and treading on their corns. Now, in traditional Christianity, the energy of the 7 deadly sins can be transformed into 7 virtues. So I've written the 7 virtues around the outside there, and I've put the deadly sins on the inside. So the concept here is that the very energy of greed, say, if it's taken control of, can lead to charity. The energy of pride can lead to humility. Lust can be transformed into chastity, sloth into diligence, gluttony into temperance, envy into patience, wrath into kindness. We're trying to turn turn the coin over. We're trying to transform ourselves, and having recognized the weakness, having recognized the bad habit and the inclination, the temptation, to transform that so that we can manifest its opposite. Now, this is very high teaching, and this is what Christianity is very largely about, but this isn't actually taught very much anymore. It was when I was young, but it's not. I have not seen anyone talking about these kind of things in church. It's all about the rights of this or that or the other group, and how we must not judge them for, not following what we would think is the right way, and that it's all of this, and that's not what the Christian path is all about. It's actually about self-transformation. By struggling with our weaknesses, we can transform the negative energy powering them into the positive energy of a virtue. And these virtues or talents, those virtues or talents we are born with count for much less than those we develop in life. We gain in virtue by struggling to overcome our innate weaknesses. So you might pride yourself that you've got certain virtues. You're just like that. It's just how you've always been. You're naturally charitable, you're naturally chaste or humble or whatever. But you might be quite negative in all the other things. And it's working on those negativities is where the struggle comes from. It's not from manifesting the good virtues that you've already got. It's actually about gaining control and manifesting the positive side of the things you haven't got at birth. And this is kind of what it's all about, and the way that we can progress. I'll let you into a secret. I mean, as a boy, certainly, probably well into manhood, I was quite slothful, what you might call lazy. That's still a temptation now, I can tell you. But I have learned to control it somewhat, which is how you've got these lectures. I've had to push myself to make them. It'd be much easier for me to just say, oh, well, someone else will do it. They can read the books by Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, they can go to lectures by Krishnamurti or whatever. It doesn't need me to do it, I can just enjoy myself. Well, this is, for me, a temptation, and that's something I've had to overcome. And you will have things like this in yourself too, that you're having to overcome. You might have a terrible temper, and learning to control that temper, anger management they call it, don't they? And to manifest kindness instead could be a real struggle. I don't have that problem. I'm not a bad-tempered person. I don't have the problem of managing a bad temper. Yes, I can get cross sometimes, but not very often. But it's not something that, a small spark causes me to erupt. But it might be for you, and that is something that you would have to work with. But you might have no problems about the sloth bit. That might be no trouble to you. Oh, never slothful, never lazy, always diligent. So this is how we have to see ourselves, and to stop judging ourselves, and even more, stop judging other people. Because then they might have strengths that you haven't got, and you might have weaknesses that they haven't got. So these are things that we need to consider here. Now, I put this slide in because I thought we've been doing a lot on the book of Revelation, and I'm going to be coming to this lady again shortly in our next lecture, I believe. But the whore of Babylon in the book of Revelation rides the dragon with 7 heads. And I think these 7 heads probably symbolize the 7 deadly sins. The whore tempts and profits from other people's weakness. Now, this is the world, or worldliness, that we see all around us every day. We're all the time being tempted by the seductress. This is what, the whore, most whores, I haven't experienced this myself, but I know it's true. Most whores seek to hook, to tempt. It's not necessarily, it might be sometimes that men go out looking for a whore, but mostly it's the other way around. The whores are looking for customers, and therefore they wear short skirts and high heels and certain stockings. They know the kind of clothing that will turn men on, and so they will try to dress like that image that will entice. But it's not just sexual whoring we're talking about here with the whore of Babylon. We're talking about all the other kinds of whoring. The whoring that will get people to drink more alcohol. The whoring that gets them to smoke cigarettes. The whoring that will get them to spend loads of money on clothes they don't need. The whoring that will get them to want to aggrandize more wealth in a cheap, easy way, through gambling perhaps, and so on. This whore is tempting us all the time, flaunting on the back of this seven-headed dragon. And she's the whore of Babylon, because Babylon was the first city to introduce money, physical money. And this is every city in the world is a whore of Babylon that's all the time trying to tempt people to do things that they are against their religion and their nature. So one of the biggest whores, in my opinion, is Los Angeles these days, and it calls itself Hollywood Babylon, doesn't it? London is a huge whore, absolutely. So we have to struggle against that and see through the whore of Babylon, so she doesn't just crush us and rob us and turn us into shadows of what we should be, because she preys on our weaknesses. So, recognizing our weaknesses and struggling with them is the beginning of transformation. But this is not a battle that you will win once and can then forget about. Temptation will come about over and over again, and nearly always in the same way. The glutton may remain impervious to the temptation to violence, sloth, or sexual perversion, but he is always tempted by gluttony. Struggling with gluttony will be the stage where his or her primary struggle will take place. So each of these 7 deadly sins is the stage that you are going to have to struggle with, whichever one or whichever ones are your thing. And it might be sloth, or it might be anger, or it might be sexual immorality, or whatever. And these are the things that you are going to struggle with in this life. And it's always the temptations, when they come to you, will always be the same ones. That's why we tend to think in terms of a particular demon. It's always that same demon that has to be cast out, and then he comes back again, he has to be cast out again, comes back again, has to be cast out again. It's very tiring, isn't it? Fortunately, we do get help, and that's another lecture, though, that we'll be talking about in due course. So, struggling with bad habits and weaknesses of character is just the beginning. In addition to this, we must also struggle to bring into being the fruits of our lives. A simple way to think of this is to struggle to make the world a better place for your having lived. This may be some creative or artistic endeavour. It may be doing a really good job, however humble it may be. For example, if you're a window cleaner, struggle to be the best window cleaner in your town or city. For example, if you rent an apartment, try to leave it a better place for your having lived there. I mean, when you leave the apartment, try, when your tenancy's up and you're moving on, try to leave it better than it was when you lived there, or before you lived there. Always try to make things better. And if you buy a house, and you're going to want to make it better anyway, because it's going to be worth more, I hope. But try to make it better, just for its own sake. Improve it, improve the garden, improve everything about it that you can, certainly within your pocket. So that it's, by doing that, you're raising the level of the housing stock. And if you do this in your life with everything, or try to, then the general standard of the culture rises. And you in turn can transform from being a man or a woman. Yeah. These days they're not even allowed to call people man and woman. Can you believe that? We're supposed to think a man who calls himself a woman is a woman. It's madness, isn't it? But you want to transform not just that way. You want to become not just a man, you want to become a gentleman. And if you're a woman, you want to become a lady. Now, I'm not talking about going to the Queen giving you a title. Yeah, so rise, Sir Adrian. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your standard, raising your own standards. And if you can raise your standards, and if everybody did, the standards of the whole society would rise. And there'd be far less crime. There'd be far less all the things that decay a society. And the civilization itself would rise. That's why Western civilization was really quite high in the 19th century, because people had standards. Even poor people had standards. And I can remember when I was a boy going down to Merthyr to visit my grandmother. It's quite a poor town. It's a mining town in South Wales. But the people there had standards, and they would scrub the step leading into their house. And they would keep their house spotless. In spite of the cold, and the dust in the air and the smoke and what have you, they would keep their houses spotless because they had standards. And this is what we have to struggle for and struggle with, is to raise our standards. Doesn't matter how poor you are or how rich you are. You can live like a sloth. That's perhaps not the right word. A slob. I remember the Marquis of, what was his name? Marquis of Bath, the last one. Absolute slob. He painted graffiti all over his own ancestral home. The man looked like a slob and he acted like a slob. And from people who've met him that I know, they said he was a horrible man. They disliked him intensely. Well, he was born as a marquis, right? Marquis is one of the highest levels of the aristocracy. There's only dukes above them, and then you've got the royalty above that. They're higher than sort of ordinary earls and viscounts and barons and what have you. Very high level marquis, and yet the man lived like a slob. So we have to make sure that even if you're very poor, you can live internally, and in your terms of your standards, you can live like a real marquis. You can be a gentleman or a lady in your behaviour and in your attitude. So this is how we have to struggle, and it can start with something simple like the window cleaner who cleans windows meticulously. And I got this idea from a friend of mine. I hadn't seen him for many years, and he was telling me that his own father had been a window cleaner, and he taught him, one of the things he taught him was that whatever you do, do it well. And his father had built up a window cleaning business, and I think he'd done quite well out of it. And he said, doesn't matter how low the job is, could be flipping burgers, could be polishing shoes, could be anything. Do it well. And if you do it well, you will move on from that to something better. And this is kind of what we need, particularly for young people, to understand. You're not going to walk straight in to a high-paying... this is the temptation that, I'll go to university, I'll get myself a degree, and then, they're going to give me a really good job of high income, I'll have a fast car. Not going to happen. You come out of university, you're going to be making the tea. You're going to be running errands. You're going to have to learn the tricks of the trade. You're going to have to learn self-discipline. That's one of the things you've got to learn. You've got to get out of bed every day in the morning at 7, and you're going to get yourself to work in time. Yeah, and you're going to have to stay there for 8 hours or however long to do the job. And you're going to have to turn up there looking clean. You're going to be wearing a suit and a tie. You're going to have to do all these things. And that can be a huge shock when you've been a lazy slob of a student. So transformation starts with little things, and it starts with getting to work on time, in the right state, with the right clothes on, with your hair the right length for what's required, the right politeness when you're dealing with customers or dealing with other members of staff, diligence in doing the job that's been set for you, and working your way. And once you've got to a certain level, you might get to the point where you can start your own business. And I have another very good friend who, when he was a student, he was an absolute slob. Yeah, smoking dope all the time, and a bit of LSD on the side, and drinking and whoring. Well, not whoring, but lots of girls. And I thought, well, life's going to be rough on him. But the funny thing is, it worked the other way. He realised, young enough, that he needed to change his ways, and he learnt self-discipline. He learnt how to play the game. He learnt how to apply himself, and in due course he became a managing director in a company, and eventually he left that and started his own company. He's now a multi-millionaire. He's a multi-millionaire. I would never have guessed that he would be the one of my friends who would be, or one of them, to become a multi-millionaire. He got a lot of self-discipline and a lot of drive and a lot of the right talents, and he's worked with himself in that way and developed. He's not at all spiritual, but in terms of life, he's transformed himself. And this is how we have to be. We have to learn how to raise our standards and how to take control over our lives and not just be driven by our habits that we've inherited or come down the line from grandparents, great-grandparents, back to Adam. We need to be better than that, and we need to transform ourselves from just being men and women into gentlemen and ladies to start with, and then we can see where that takes us later on. So I think we've come to the end of these slides. Yes. So in the next episode, we will look at the role of sacrifice in the context of transformation. So, yeah, I'm not suggesting that we have to do an Abraham and put your son on the altar and be prepared to sacrifice him. And that's not what I'm talking about, but we will come to that in the next lecture. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you found this interesting and fun, I hope, at least with the Marlowe bit. And we'll meet again. Bye-bye.